Hello, BookTube. I have another page 112 tag for you today. That is a tag that was created by Sean the Book Maniac, one of our best booktubers, as an adaptation of a certain French prize where the judges are given only page 112 of the manuscripts under consideration, under the assumption that most manuscripts are heavily vetted and cared for and dusted and cleaned and polished at their very beginning. A rather cynical but I think accurate assumption that that's mostly what people read, and that if you turn all the way to page 112, you will catch the author in the act of being themselves, so to speak, and be able to more accurately judge strengths and weaknesses of their prose. It's a fun way to dig into prose and figure out what you can tell about it when you're coming right into the middle of things without the build and momentum. And I did a page 112 tag the other day, yesterday it might have been, in which I performed a variation on the theme. Instead of going to page 112 of the books in question, I went to a certain subject. I read 3 different authors writing about the Battle of Antietam. And it was fun. It's been a lot of fun to get all of your emails and comments, and but it's not exactly the page 112 tag, which involves a certain element of randomness. And this morning, when I came back online, I saw that Sean the Book Maniac over there in Japan had done the page 112 tag the right way, the blind way. So I thought, a little abashed, that I would do that myself today. So we're going to do another page 112 tag today, and we'll do it the correct way, where I will read you from page 112 of 3 books in question, right in the middle of things, without any thematic unity, and then I will tell you what the books are. And I have not read from any of these books on this channel before, so we shall see what we shall see. We'll start with possibility number 1. And possibility number 1 is a conversation between 2 sisters on the phone. That's going to explain some of the things here, but I'll be here to curate as we go along. Marlene had always wondered at Cora's inordinate pride in their family's roots, since the truth was most of their relatives were still as dirt poor as the first Baines had been upon arriving on the coast of Maine 2 centuries before. The bride was at the head of the line, and the groom's father was right behind her, so everybody was guilty there, Marlene said. I love evening affairs, getting dressed up and mingling. Guy and I loved to go out at night. Just an excuse for drunken shenanigans, if you ask me. Brings out the worst in people. That's her sister talking. From the other end of the line, Marlene heard the scream of a tea kettle and a thud as her sister's feet hit the floor and plodded across the kitchen to the stove. Though she was a slight woman, Cora had always walked on her heels. Even in house slippers, she sounded like a moose at half-trot. Oh, I don't know about that, Cora. I don't see much difference between drinking at home or at a party. When Guy's sisters got married, the parties went on all night long. Everybody'd start dancing, and the supper'd be late, and sometimes not till 10 o'clock at night. It was an awful lot of fun. Lord Almighty, those Frenchmen love a spectacle, don't they? They still do that foolish duck dance at weddings? Cora asked, sounding distracted. It's not a spectacle when everybody's having fun, Cora, and the duck dance is just for the kids, you know. And anyway, what's the harm in a little foolishness from time to time? I don't know. You'd have to ask Erlene. She seems to be her specialty these days. That's why we're having the Memorial Day cookout at lunchtime instead of later. My hypoglycemia's acting up, and I can't take that moody tribe running amok in my house all night long. So there we have the first reading here, and it's got strengths. A lot of writers think that writing dialogue is easy. It's not, and getting it to carry even a small part of a scene is no mean feat. There are some minor infelicities here. For instance, calling the activities of a group of people that activities about which you vaguely disagree, calling them shenanigans is a 2019 patois. It's a 2019 idiom. It wasn't in general usage in 2012. It certainly has not been in general usage forever. It's wandered all over the map, but it is now a little bit of a parlance thing, and it stands to reason that it won't be in 10 years. So I haven't read the book in question here, except for this one little segment, a little bit around it. But I'd be willing to bet that when I do read the book, it's going to stand out as something that the author would say, but not ever that the characters would say. And the other infelicity is that line. What was it here? Marlene heard the scream of the tea kettle and a thud as her sister's feet hit the floor and prodded across the kitchen to the stove, which brings to mind the unfortunate mental image of Cora's feet walking independent of her, just sort of crossing the floor on their own. But overall, without hitting the reader over the head, that the exchange there does a real good job of telling us what these two women are like, how different they are. Giving us a sense of them regardless of exposition dumps. Then we'll move on to the next book, and we'll go to page 112. Life was flux, a swirl of cellular degradation and regeneration. To demand consistency of a person's character, then, contradicted our most basic biological state. Why did it grate so when Jane and Beau smiled beatifically across their faux wormwood table at guess? Was it because their feelings were fake? No. They believed. They ratified their feelings by believing they felt them. They believed every word they spoke. They believed every fish they pulled out of the sea, every nail they hammered, every vegetable they harvested, every fire they built. Yet it was a stage play, and they were playing characters. But it worked backward. Jane and Beau were constructing outer lives that might confer some meaning upon their inner lives. They had made themselves into exactly who they wanted to be, and wasn't that commendable? Wasn't it? Why did it make her sick? And who are you, she asked herself, the all-knowing judge of what is fake and real? Nah, just a casual observer, uncommitted, unspoiled, pretty much perfect. Are you going to do this or not? Socks on, long johns hitched up, she stretched in the light. The blanket fell away from her torso, and she drew a sharp breath when the cold hit her bare skin. She pulled the shirt on and swung her legs out of the bed. There's something about the light here that cleans you out, doesn't it? It's the reflection off the snow, the gonging whiteness pouring in through the windows like an awkward teenage boy who's everywhere at once, thrashing around the room in search of something important he'd lost. A guitar pick or a condom that slipped between the wall and the dresser. It's assertive, this light, she thought, insistent and irritating, but you still want it all over you. She said, "Goddamn," she said out loud in greeting to the day, a solvent to break down the noise in her head and start fresh. Shivering bathroom ablutions, freezing toilet seat, robe, downstairs for coffee. Is she going to do it dressed like this? Yes, while the men are out. Very different kind of prose than the first installment. Very, very much more intellectual and theoretical and maybe even atmospheric. A little bit disturbing that the infelicity of the first reading is carried over by sheer coincidence in the infelicity of the second reading, where the character is stretching in bed when she throws her legs out onto the floor. I don't know what it is with this here. And also, there's the tinniness of that word ablutions. That means washing. And I, again, like with shenanigans, I would be willing to bet a Boston cream pie that when I actually read that passage in context, ablutions will not be a word this character would ever even think, much less routinely use. I'd be willing to bet it's a writerly word. It shares the same sin as shenanigans in the context of the previous reading, which is that it stands out. That it stands out as being artificial and therefore lazy. But the idea of characters constructing themselves from what they want to be is adroitly phrased here. It is eloquent prose. So that is the second segment here. I think we can probably agree there's a lot more going on here. That could be just a matter of random chance, and we can probably agree that some of what's going on is a little bit odd. A little bit odd. What are we told here? There's something about the light here that cleans you out, doesn't it? It's the reflection off the snow, the gonging whiteness pouring in through the window like an awkward you see, gonging whiteness, the brazen clanging whiteness, and the way that the bright light of the morning cleans you out. That's how the meditation on the morning light starts, and then it immediately goes to like an awkward teenage boy who's everywhere at once looking for a lost condom, and that you want him all over you. And that simile doesn't work at all. Or if it does, both of them don't. They don't work together. What an odd way to describe bracing, gonging, white morning light, I guess is what I'm trying to say. What an odd way to describe bright morning light as a furtive teenager that you want all over you. It's very odd, and it'll be an open question, the kind that page 112 tags evoke, of whether or not that is a signature of the book, or whether or not that sticks out for this one passage and is really, really unfortunate, kind of odd. And then we'll do our last installment here, our last segment for this page 112 tag. Unfortunately, this is not from page 112 of the book in question, because the book in question, our third book's author, got a little tired, and he petered out before he got to page 112. So I picked a late page. It can't explicitly be page 112 because there's nothing there. And we'll start, let's see here, where will we start? She kicks the rug aside and sees a trapdoor. There's a little divot so you can scoop up the flush-set handle with your finger. There's never been any mention of a door in the floor or of a cellar, but who knows? Maybe it's always been here. After all, Yes, that's the character's name, lived in this house her whole life without ever knowing about the attic until 5 years ago, when every room was suddenly hit with a stench that her mom had said after a day or so was the smell of something big and dead, and that it wasn't coming from the ceiling exactly, but the attic. Yessie was 14. Yessie and Yes are the same person. It was 14 at the time and didn't know that they had an attic, so she asked her mom to clarify, but her mom didn't answer because she was already headed up there. Perfume rubbed into her nostrils and a bandana tied around her lower face, a flashlight in one hand and a revolver in the other. She stood on a book with brown leather covers and gold trim, and, tucking the gun in her belt for a second, she reached up and massaged the ceiling until a staircase came down and tore up flakes of paint along the seams, and she climbed it with caution, and what she found up there in the dark was a white sheet spread out in a clearing on the floor and strewn with 3 big dead fish that appeared at a glance to have been caught just a couple of days prior. And that was evidence, too, when they started looking around, of someone having tampered with the rusted little latch of the attic's only window, which was too small for a person to crawl through. And while everybody seemed afterwards to be satisfied with having found the source of the stench and having resolved it, strangely little was mentioned about who exactly the hell went into their attic and cleared a big space and stacked some dead fish in a triangle on a clean white sheet, and why. Nor did there seem to be a great deal of concern. And now, here, out in the shed, Yessie found a door in the floor and figures maybe it's normal. She flips up the sunken latch and the trapdoor pulls up silently on clean, discreet hinges, and she points her flashlight down through the doorway. Beneath the door, she finds a staircase. 7 steps, each almost a foot tall. She cranes her neck and shines her flashlight down the stairs. They lead to a hallway. Her cell phone buzzes, and Yessie flinches, thinking maybe it's her dad discovering she's not in her room. But she checks the screen and sees another 212 number and ignores it. She leans the trapdoor back on its hinges and sits there for an indecisive moment before venturing inside, both flashlights held out ahead of her, creeping down into a cool, musky dark, her stomach sinking and goosebumps rising with a sudden chill. There's air conditioning down here, and it's working overtime. And that is our third reading here, and it also is very atmospheric, and it takes some stylistic chances. It is even more stylistic distinctive than the last one. That long passage about finding the fish in the attic, for instance, is all one sentence almost. And it's certainly read. It's written to be read as an onrush of experience, which is the character Yessie remembering that incident. Which is a little bit odd because the circumstance in which she's remembering that incident, the incident of having found a hidden space, the remembering takes place while she is at that moment finding a different hidden space and venturing into it without the protection of a mother, without the protection of a gun, without anything like that. So a more dangerous circumstance, and so on one level, if you're a writer, a more natural place to do the run-on sentence, on-rush, headlong feeling of the memory. But instead, that doesn't happen. Instead, once we shift from the memory to the new action, to the present action, the narrative becomes staccato. The sentences become shorter, and become one sentence paragraphs, as you would see if you read it with your eyes instead of listening to me drone on and on. So again, very interesting. And part of a page 112 tag is to rank the passages, to say which ones you liked the most and why. And in my own defense, Sean often winces when the creator of this tag often winces when it comes time to do that, because, on one hand, you're only reading one page, and on the other hand, there is something to be said, legitimately something to be said, for the power of these things in situ, rather than just prizing them out alone. There is, in other words, something that's inherently a little bit unfair about page 112 tag, right? We don't read only one page of a novel, and maybe you shouldn't judge. There are all sorts of strengths that a novel can have that are built on accumulation, on momentum, and that therefore are completely violated by a page 112 tag. And also, there are all sorts of things that happen in each prose segment, and you can't always be sure which one you can't. It's not. It doesn't always seem fair or even possible to compare them all. But I am nevertheless going to rank mine in terms of favorites. And number 3, I'll go down in order from number 3 to my favorite. Number 3 would be the first one that we read, which is a debut novel by a Maine author. This is W.S. Winslow. This is The Northern Reach. And this is W.S. Winslow. This is her debut novel, and it is her attempt to write that thing that has been the holy grail of so many writers from Maine, and that is to write a Maine novel. There was even a novel called Maine that was very good, and I've read so many of these. I can hardly think of a region of the country, of the United States of America, that more readily prompts people to try and capture it in a novel. Not slice of life, but rather the spirit of the place. I haven't read this book, like I said, except for that one brief excerpt. It's about a group of families, including the Baines family, whose name is mentioned in the excerpt, who've been in Maine forever, and who are cash poor but land rich. They have an estate, basically a great big rambly house, and a lot of social cachet, and the times they are a-changing. I haven't read anything more than that, but I have read dozens and dozens of novels where the author attempts to write a quote-unquote Maine novel. I'm not sure that it's ever been done. I'm not sure that it's possible to do, but it sure has led me to some great books. The book called Maine actually was really, really good. We'll see if this is the same, but this is still going to be my third pick out of 3. And a lot of that could be just personal. I have a relatively thin leash when it comes to family drama, sisters, aunts, that sort of thing. It has to go out of its way to really please me. And there was, in addition to that word shenanigans and its common usage, its 2020 usage, there was a little bit of an easy dichotomy there between the stuck up, fun deploring sister who makes mewling noises about her hypoglycemia. That some aspects of that is well done, but some aspects of that struck me as a little bit easy, which might end up being true since this is a debut novel, and that's one of the things that debut novels tend to succumb to. Then my number 2 is also going to be the second thing that I read. By sheer coincidence, my list of preferences actually goes in order here. So the second pick that I'm going to use is going to be the second book. This is by Jack Livings, and it's The Blizzard Party. And this is a great, big, ambitious novel. The Blizzard Party and The Northern Reach don't come out until 2021. This is a big, ambitious novel set in a cross-section of New York City during the legendary blizzard of 78. Quite a few of you will be too young to know what I'm talking about. There was a gigantic nor'easter that hit New England and New York in 1978, and people died. And there was, if you Google Blizzard of 78 and do an image search, you will see all the pictures that we lived with at the time. I remember the Blizzard of 78 like it was yesterday. There have been worse winters, of course, and there have been a couple of worse storms. One in 1993 that was particularly monstrous. But the Blizzard of 78 right away had that kind of mythic ability that it was the same thing as the Hurricane of 38. There have been worse hurricanes, but the Hurricane of 38, before they named them, has the same kind of mythic cachet. And this, that Blizzard of 78 apparently plays a very strong role, a central role in this book. And again, I haven't read this book except for that one excerpt. It's my second choice. I like it a little bit better because there's a little bit more to it. It's a little bit fuller bodied. I don't know that I like the shift from the airy philosophizing about how we construct ourselves from the stories we want to be true about us to a woman lazing around in bed, getting up on a bright cold morning. I'm not sure that shift worked right in that little micro location. I'd have to read more to see, but it didn't completely convince me. It didn't completely win me over. And it wasn't just that weird simile that the bright, sharp, gonging light of morning is like a groping teenager looking for a guitar pick. I don't think it is. I know that in the 21st century we're not really allowed to disagree with figures of speech, with metaphors or similes, but I don't think that worked at all. And then the third book is the only one of the three that you can go and buy right now. And unlike the Northern Reach and the Blizzard Party, it's only going to cost you $1 because it's self-published. It was recently sent to me by its author, who was once upon a time a booktuber. Alex Sarando once had a channel. His handle, so to speak, is View from a Bar. And he once did a thing called Kingly Endeavors, where he was reading his way through the canon of Stephen King. And as is so often the case, loading on those crappy novels a kind of eloquent dissection that they don't deserve. I was watching those videos before I knew Alex. We're friends now, but then he was just a stranger who I was watching those videos and I was thinking, imagine this kind of energy applied to virtually anything else. Imagine this kind of energy applied to the Hornblower novels or the life work of Anthony Burgess or whatever, instead of being applied to this garbage. I enjoyed the hell out of those videos, and then Alex left BookTube, and he has for a long time now been involved in the 1,000 Movie Project, where he found one of those 1,000 movies to see before you die books, and decided not only to watch every movie in that book, but also to dramatize the transformative experience. And in the meantime, in between doing that and the 1,000 Movie Podcast, he has also managed to write a book. It's called My 3 Repugnant Children, of whom I've recently grown fond. And that's what it looks like. It's available. It's an ebook. It's available on Amazon for $1. And it's a weird, I don't think he would mind if I call it, it's a weird amalgamation of little bits and pieces of fiction, little bits and pieces of nonfiction. There are some hand-drawn comics that are sprinkled throughout. It's a weird reading experience. It won't take you more than an hour to do. But I believe that there are bits and pieces of it that you will remember for a long time. There are bits. Alex is a very good writer and a very smart guy, and there as a consequence of things in here that you're going to remember. One rather bravura bit in particular, for me anyway, a bunch of recovered old cell phones that are dredged up from the deeps and start ringing. They start reconnecting with people. That's a moment that I could easily see. I'd not just read it, but easily see it somehow realized on film. And there are moments like that scattered all throughout here. This was a surprise to me. I did not know that Alex was working on this book, but it would have been, I didn't know that he was working on it. He sent me a copy of it, and it would have been intensely embarrassing if it had been bad. But it isn't. So in this page 112 tag, Alex got a little tired before he could get all the way to page 112. It is the 21st century after all. Where did I go wrong? but nevertheless, I believe there's quite enough in here to justify you laying out $1 for it, including at one point the brief allusion, a brief description of a character who may or may not have something in common with me. That also was a bit of a surprise. I wish I could say it was the first time anyone's ever done it. in a book, but it isn't. Anyway, I actually liked that excerpt best of all these three. I thought it had the most kinetic energy. I thought it was, in terms of one of the only yardsticks you can actually use when you are ranking your page 112 excerpts is how badly it makes you want to keep reading. Right? That's pretty much one of the only yardsticks you can use. You don't know what's going on in the page. You don't know the surrounding activity. In this case, I do, but in most cases you don't, and you certainly can't convey it on one page. Instead, you look for how bad do you want to keep going. And for me, if I had read that excerpt alone with these other two, I would have wanted to keep going with it more than with any other. If nothing else, then for the simple reason of finding out what is down in that air-conditioned cellar. That's just a simple what happens next type thing. But simple what happened next type things are easy to botch. I read them all the time from authors who botch them. So where they clearly want you to care about what happens next, and you couldn't care less. So I'm going to rank this as number one. I'm also going to recommend it. Go to Amazon, download a copy for $1. Put it on your device and read it. It's weird and funky and a little bit unpredictable, a little bit seedy, and it makes me impatient for what Alex will do. It makes me impatient from it's going to be the cause of several hectoring Voxer messages in addition to being part of the page 112 tag. And it also underscores a couple of issues that have been ongoing on this channel about self-publishing versus industry publishing. The Northern Reach and the Blizzard Party are industry published books where these manuscripts have been worked on for months and months. They've been vetted 6 ways from Sunday. They have an art department to do the covering. They have professional editors. They have, down the line, when the time comes in February and March, they will have publicity departments to cry them up all over the place. Whereas My Three Repugnant Children doesn't have any of that. And, you know, is I believe able to stand side by side with those other books, which raises the whole question, not just with Alex, but with a whole bunch of self-published authors. What are we going to do in the 21st century? What are we going to do with all the worthwhile stuff that's being self-published that we're never going to know about, that we don't have any way to know about? I wish there were a better way. I mean, the New York Times and Publishers Weekly and Library Journal have all started devoting lots of attention to self-published, to indie books. And there are all sorts of individual organs. There are websites and blogs and journals that are devoted to indie literature. But you still know that you're missing them. There's no way to miss these two books. If you're a bookish person, there's no way to miss them. Depending on how bookish you are, but no matter how bookish you are, there's no way to miss them because they're going to be in catalogs. They're going to be on book lists, Esquire and Oprah magazine and whatnot, and NPR. They're all going to say, well, here are some new books that are coming out this month, and one of them is, you're going to see mock-ups of these covers, and then when the time comes, they're going to get reviewed in journals that you read, and they're going to be stacked in bookstores where you visit. None of that is going to be true of My Three Repugnant Children. This thing is on its own. And what do, it's not completely on its own now because its author knows me, but what are we going to do about that? I guess just be more mindful of tipping each other off to the good stuff that we find. Although, how many people even go exploring? And I'm part of the problem here because I've been doing a year's best and worst list for a long time, 20 years at least, and I've never done a best or worst indie list. I don't think I've ever done one of those. Maybe 1 year or two, but how much of my reading is that way? I often give myself a martyr complex by saying you don't need to go exploring with indie books because you are forced to read one crappy indie book a day for Kirkus reviews. I mean, you don't want to read any more than that. But I would hasten to say two things. One, not all those indie books I read are crappy. And two, there's a vast ocean of other stuff out there that I don't know anything about. I try, but I don't know anything about it. My Three Repugnant Children, actually, the fact that it could stack up so well against two books that are going to be hyped in their season, renews my determination to spend more time with indie books in 2021 and to tell you about them. Right? There's hundreds of thousands of you out there. You're all active, adventurous readers. A lot of you have come to trust a lot of my judgments on books or my recommendations, and even if you don't trust it completely, you're at least willing to give it a try or investigate it if it's the kind of thing that interests you. So this page 112 tag was also a little bit of a temperature taking for me on a whole bunch of indie versus mainstream publishing issues. But anyway, there you go. Three passages. I'd love to know what you made of each one of them. And how you would have ranked them. I have a feeling, just off the top of my head, I have a feeling that the Blizzard Party is going to do well among you. That middle excerpt that we did. I have a feeling that a lot of you are going to like that. Maybe that means that a lot of you, and myself included, are going to like the book. We shall see. But in the meantime, I will wrap this up for now. This went way too long. And I will leave a link. If I can figure out how to do it, and if I remember, I will leave a link to the Amazon page for Alex's book. So you can go and spend $1 and read it for yourself. But one way or another, I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube. Oh, that was Frida jumping off the bed. She was on this bed the whole time just playing with my hand, but she didn't want to be on camera. I'll try better. Can I? A bit. There she is. There's the beam. All right, well, I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.